Hello, Coven. It's me, Cassandra. I'm flying solo without Joanna today, but I have a very special guest. It is my friend Westin. How are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Eh, Good. So, if you the name Weston doesn't sound familiar, but the voice sounds familiar, you might know him across horror talk, across the gaming community, across pretty much any corner of TikTok as Just Hauntr. And he is your favorite undead friend. He does a lot of content with vampires, and it was only fitting to bring him on to the corner of the internet that talks about vampires. Um, and today is a very special one. It's kind of a unique movie. Um, it's very not talked about. It's getting more traction now because obviously Deadpool versus Wolverine came out this summer. Uh, Spoiler alert, if you don't want to hear this, please like fast forward. But Blade came back in part of Deadpool versus Wolverine, and people were like, okay, that's weird. How did that happen? Well, it happened because Ryan Reynolds and Wesley Snipes did a Blade movie together called Blade Trinity. And that is kind of like the forgotten Blade movie. Um, a lot of people don't talk about it. So don't give it a lot of love, but I love it. And I love Blade. I mean, there is Wesley Snipes is just perfection as Blade.
He's so awesome in all of those movies. It's just kind of like it's an action horror movie fan's dream, those Blade movies.
It really is. It really is. And this movie kind of takes the idea of who would be the big bad that could actually have potential to go up against Blade. And we kind of get an answer about that. And it's kind of a weird answer, kind of adds some mythology, some levels that we didn't know about. So we are going to get into it. But for right now, we are going to get into our wonderful theme song, which has been so graciously, Michael Cooper has let us use this song. And if you are ever interested about hearing it or any of Michael Cooper's other songs, we will link his stuff in the description down below. But let's go ahead and get started.
You're my sickness, the fever in my heart, hunger burning in my blood, gnawing me like a bone. Can't get away, not even if I try. Holding to your gravity, losing all control. Join the party, the table's been set. Everyone's gathered, won't you be our feast? Delicious and sweet, bone in the meat, you're my delicacy.
All right, we are back. So,
Before we actually got on, you were hyping up that song.
yes, I
And I
was.
gotta say, it lived up to the hype.
Yeah. So, if anyone is ever curious, obviously this podcast is a collaboration between um Coven of Screams, which is our friend Joanna, and myself for Horrorcraft. But on Horrorcraft, one of my absolute favorite people, they are quite literally, I feel like they're my spirit guide in life, because they just know when to check in with me, and they know things about myself that I don't really like to talk about, and they are the wise shaman that is leading me through this journey. But Michael Cooper has wonderful, wonderful books, and he has the Dark Gospel trilogy. And if you
Mhm.
like angels and demons and really just intense, like spirit, like I wouldn't even say spiritual, but just like intense, um, I just couldn't talk enough about it. It's just great, and his work is just phenomenal. So I'll have to send you the links when we're off of this. But if anybody else is curious, his stuff is linked down below. And he writes these songs, they then get generated, and he is very specific about the melody and everything like that. But it is his kind of he does a concept album with each one, and when he'll let me hear some before he releases it. When I heard this, I was like, listen, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but I really need a song for this podcast that we're about to start. And I think that that's great because it sounds like a vampiress going in for her prey. And he so graciously let us use it. But that whole song sounds like, getting seduced by a vampire, like coming and then having your whole world taken from you. So, which
Very
is,
Queen of the Damned.
yeah,
Yeah.
very, very much so. So it fits the vibe of this, obviously, because vampires. So, but yeah, so if you're ever curious about any of that, it's down in the description down below. He has a lot of his songs on TikTok. Highly would encourage you to check them out. But yeah, it's kind of fitting going into what we're talking about because we're talking about Blade. And I feel like Blade and Queen of the Damned have very similar vibes and very different kind of fields, I think we would say. But they both have the same. But before we get started on that, let's talk about you, Westin, because I know you are just everywhere. You're everywhere. If you are not like me, where I am constantly getting into Weston's lives to learn about all the cool games that are out in the horror community, Weston not only does incredible cosplays with not only serial killers but vampires. You
A
just
lot of
have cool,
vampires.
yeah, a lot of vampires. We were just talking about Deacon Frost, and I'm holding him too, doing a Deacon Frost cosplay, because we need that in the world. We need more Blade. We need more Deacon Frost.
I loved honestly the first Blade movie, especially. I mean, the first like 5 minutes of that movie, you have like
Oh,
the blood rave party that everybody still talks about now.
listen, there is a part of my soul that saw that because a lot of people don't realize that, but Blade was one of my first vampire movies. It was Blade and Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola version. But
Mhm.
that was kind of my first like big like adult vampire movie. And there is a part of me that since watching that vampire rave, blood rave scene, that I have not gone back that thrill since then. I'm constantly chasing that thrill. Um,
Yeah,
so
I mean that movie and Lost Boys for me were the first because we used to go on trips all the time when I was a kid, and the only two movies we had were Euro Trip and Lost Boys.
oh
And
gosh.
we'd always have to put those on every single time we were at our thing. So I love vampires in general. I think Near Dark was another one of my first movies I
Oh
remember.
gosh. Near Dark.
I had what I think New Nightmare was the first horror movie I ever watched, but I specifically remember right after that Near Dark was one of them, and that's kind of where I just fell in love with like vampires in general. Because I mean, Bill Paxton looked like such a badass in that bar.
Oh god, that bar scene and with
Yeah.
his spurs and the jacket and I mean, like, it's gold, and for me, that was always peak Bill Paxton, like,
Mm.
him and Near Dark and him and Aliens, and obviously, I love Twister, but those 2 movies specifically were, like, my peak Bill Paxton, because I just felt like, how could you get any better than that? Because Aliens, the Alien trilogy is very sacred to me, because I feel like it's just something I grew up with, and it was
Mm.
kind of my comfort series, oddly enough. But just because I feel like Ripley is a strong woman. But the
Yeah.
same thing too about vampires. You have very strong female characters in vampire movies because you kind of can't have one without the other,
Mhm.
especially when you're talking about like the seduction side of things and different things like that. So you have women who are badasses. And Blade is a big one too because you have a lot of women that kind of get thrown into the mix because of like this ongoing war between vampires and humans that just kind of cranked it out. Like, and if we didn't have that, I think in the Blade movies, we wouldn't have Underworld.
Yeah.
I really do feel that way.
That's funny you mentioned that because literally I was rewatching these movies again, and I'm like, man, this time period for like vampire movies was awesome because it was all action. It was all just kick-ass, badassery.
Yes.
It was like, I'm trying to think of when Twilight came out and everything just kind of shifted away from the whole like badass stuff to like the sexy vampires. You know,
Yeah.
the
It
sparkly,
the
sexy
sparkly, to me, first of all, to me, the only sparkly vampires will always and forever be the Lost Boys. Just we just gotta get that cleared out, okay?
Uh,
That to me has a part of my soul, especially the music in there, because that is the first vampire movie that I listened to not only the music and watched it, that
mhm.
everything matched up. But they are the original sparkly vampires. Even Joel Schumacher talks about how they added glitter into the vampire blood, so that way when the vampires like bit the dust, it would have that like effect.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but 2009 is when Twilight came out, and it's so sad because Twilight were such good books. When you were, especially me in my like teenage years, reading those books, they
Mhm.
were fantastic.
Yeah.
What got put on screen was not so much. And I think there are multi layers to it. And now looking back, I don't think it's as bad as what I originally thought. Um, but still, it's not what you expected. But yeah, I think we're starting to get that again with like
Mhm.
Abigail and a lot of other vampire movies that have come out in the last couple of years, like The Invitation, Abigail. I mean, now we get Nosferatu coming out again. Um, and I think we've gotten back to that like power of the badass vampire, the scary vampire, because this Nosferatu looks like it is going to steal everyone's soul on Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Which
But
I'm
that's a
here
good
for.
thing. That's the
Yeah,
good thing about vampire movies, I at least feel, is like there's so many layers to it, right? You had the vampire movies of the early 90s or late 90s, early 2000s where they were
yeah,
badass action-packed movies. Then they started to get they went hardcore into like the sexy vampire diaries, stuff like that. And it's so versatile in a way. It's almost like now with the vampire movies, they can be badass killers and still be sexy.
yeah, yeah. No, I think we kind of lost that, and I think part of that too is we over sexualized Dracula a lot. I feel like I'm part of that problem though, because my first like real crush growing up was Gerard Butler in
Okay.
Dracula
Okay.
2000.
Mhm.
I was just incensed. And then after watching that, and he was Phantom of the Opera, and a lot of people that were around me loved the Raoul character, and I was like, are you kidding me? Are you for real right now? Like it's Gerard Butler. Like he is a phantom in a mask. Okay, I guess I just wasn't around the right crowd at that point in time. But
Yeah.
um we Dracula just got kind of taken and spinned into other things. And so when you have other movies that come out like this one that kind of shake with that idea, I think it could either be received in a really great way, but in the most cases, it's not.
Mhm.
Like you see this with Dracula 2000, Dracula 3000, Dracula went to space. Coolio was in that movie. It's kind of absurd. I think it's hilarious and I think it's wonderful, but you get a lot of these movies that play with the myth of Dracula, and I think people just don't like it. They want their Dracula seductive. They don't want to
Mhm.
acknowledge that killer side of him. But without that killer side of him, there also wouldn't be that seductive side to him either. So
Yeah.
I think we're starting to get back to that, and I'm really, really hopeful. Like I said, especially with Nosferatu coming out, because there are very few things that surprise me. But the first time I watched that trailer, my brain melted for like 20 minutes. I had to sit there with my phone, like, what did I watch? Like, we never
So
even
good.
saw Count Orlok in that whole entire thing, but we saw touches of him, and I'm freaked out.
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, he's coming for my spooky soul, and I'm okay with that. But at the same time, I don't know if I'm able to handle this journey right now. So, if you're in the movie theater with me during that time and I scream a little scrumped, just know I wasn't prepared for how badass this was going to be. But, we see that Salem's Lot came out earlier,
Mhm.
and I understand why people had objections with the movie because it sat for a long time. It's talking about the original source material. But do I think that it needed to be how the original was? No. But I
Mhm.
think the thing that was very positive about it is it was scary. It was terrifying. Like I don't think it was like shocking for me necessarily, but there are some scenes where it was like, whoa,
The visuals
okay,
were great in that movie. I mean, I
oh
know a
my,
lot of people obviously, like, you go back to the original and
yes.
they kinda took some of the scenes, but they modernized it a lot, which I really enjoy. Obviously, the window scene, I won't say what
Oh
exact
yeah. You
scene,
know
but the
what got
window
me?
scene is so cool. What?
The scene with the church when he runs
Ooh,
out for the church
yeah.
and then he turns around and there the other one, not giving too much away, but the drive-through,
Mhm.
like the
No, I love
drive-in,
that. Mhm.
that to me was crazy because you're out in the open.
Mhm.
How is that working? And then the whole I mean, like, all of it was just like, for a vampire lover, me, it felt like Christmas, okay? I'm gonna be honest. It felt like, listen, we're just getting fed a lot. Like,
That
I loved
kid
it.
carried that movie too.
Yeah,
That kid,
yeah.
I was like the whole time I was like, "Man, this kid is a badass."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It gave me it was almost like an updated Monsters Squad to me, where,
Yeah.
the kids kind of carry that movie. The kid
Mhm.
definitely, like, the whole time, he sold me on everything. And I know, like, part of the story was missing because we didn't get into, like, the big, if you know the original, we didn't get into the big, like, finding out that there was a deal in place the whole entire time and how this is happening. I don't think we needed to, though, for this one. I think it's okay to say, okay, if you want that, go back to the original. But in this case, I think as soon as that twist happens in the beginning, and I think you know what I mean by that, that first, like, oh my god, shocking moment with somebody dying, that, and then it just, like, is go since that point. I mean, it was just incredible. So we have these movies now that are getting back to where vampires are vicious. And I think
Mhm.
it's okay to be seductive and vicious at the same time. I think we have space for that. And I think it's okay to be one or the other too. Like, I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of space now to have this, but I like that we're getting back to that because I think people really got burnt out for a while with the oversaturation of like Twilight, the Vampire Diaries, the original stuff. And I'm not saying that because I'm a hater. I think the Vampire Diaries and the originals did a lot for different things. Um, didn't necessarily get into it as much. I only really liked Klaus, but to be honest, I think that's because I think he struck that like perfect like killer, but yet handsome, but like morally gray. And I think that's my jam when it comes to
Mhm.
vampires. Or very vicious vampires. I like 30 Days a Night. That's kind of the
Oh,
viciousness that I want to get back.
one of
I
my
know.
favorite movies of all time. I actually have a complete collection of the original comics of the I mean, that's how much of a big horror collector fan I am. I have all the original comics of that, and if you guys haven't actually if anybody here hasn't read the comics, I highly recommend
Oh,
you read the
they're
comics too.
amazing.
Yeah, just the story is different too in a weird kinda way. It's
Yeah.
very similar, but it's so good. That movie if I always tell people if you wanna watch a movie that's really scary with vampires, that is will always be the film that I recommend because
Y-
it just they're brutal and just they
y-
look very menacing in that movie.
Yeah, they go for your throat. And I think part of that is it is such a scary thing because that does happen. That period of
Mhm.
time where it's darkness for such a period of time, that is actually not in poor taste, but that is a running joke with us at Horrorcraft since we've done that episode. Like, we need to check in with somebody at in Utavig, I think it's Alaska,
Uh,
where they actually have that happen. Like, because it's not just 30 days, it's like 61 days that they have like the reverse every 6 months, I think it is. I'll have to fact check that, and if it's
Mhm.
different, I'll put it down below. But I know it's like 61 days because we were like, holy crap! But it's like 61 days where they like light, and there are certain things that are banned during that time, like when they bring up in the movie, like there's alcohol that's banned, different things like that, because of the fact that obviously you're in darkness for 61 days, you might go a little crazy.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
so like the vampires in that movie too, like while they're like a lot of times you'll have vampire movies where they're just animalistic, not really
yes,
smart, but the vampires in that movie, they're smart, calculated, animalistic, just
they're
don't give
like
a
the
fuck.
Jaws of vampires. Like
Yeah.
even their look to it, like everything that's just gritty. Like I really want them to bring back another like kind of version of that grittiness, because that is one where I could truly say it just takes no, like, holds no bars when it goes with gore. But I think part of that though too is it goes back to this thing with Blade, because Blade is like everyone that's in it, they are vicious. Like,
Yeah.
yes, there you do get like the seductive side, but it's kind of more, I guess I would say, hyper realistic, because Blade is not trying to be anybody but what he is, and he wrestles with who he is as a person a lot. And we
Mhm.
see that in all three movies. We see how, he settles with that. And especially in the first movie when his mom pops up, and, he kind of has to really deal with all of that. But everybody that is in it is vicious, because if you think about the first one with Deacon Frost, and then the second one with all of the characters that are in that, and oh my gosh, that scene in the end where it's just like, he's coming for all the purebreds, and you
Mhm.
know and the thing
Very
about,
political.
yeah, it is. And if you notice in the Blade movies, most of the protagonists, whether it's Deacon Frost, is the character from the second one, it's Drake, and this one, they're shades of Blade. That's
Mhm.
why it makes it so, like, going up against itself, is because in their mind, Blade should be on their side, because Blade is having to deal with all of this, and he is that kind of person. But it's because Blade has that line that he won't cross that makes him not like the person that he's facing. And I think that's a very interesting thing, because morality is a big thing when it comes to vampire movies. We find out a lot of times that it could be the monster that has the more morality versus, the person that you thought was the good guy. And
Mhm.
it could be the other way around. It's just, it deals with that idea of like the outsider and morality and how we go from there. I know for me, like, I've always loved vampire movies, because I think it goes back to that scene, if you've ever seen Fright Night,
Yeah.
um, with Jerry, where Evil Ed, he's turning Evil Ed, and he's like, nobody's gonna make fun of you anymore. Nobody's gonna do
Mhm.
this. And then they embrace, and he turns them into a vampire. All of us have kind of felt that way growing up, I think, a little bit, especially those who attach themselves to vampire movies. And it's that acceptance of being outside the fringe, of having these, beliefs and stuff that don't make you popular, but finding people that match up with that.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I mean, you kinda said something earlier that hit home. I mean, if you notice in this movie, or at least Blade Trinity, you notice Drake is like he's like, "Hey, we're both warriors in a society filled with people who are just less than, these people they aren't tough like us." You know what I
Yes.
mean? And they resonate together in that way. Where in the second movie, I keep forgetting the bad guy's name in the second movie, which by the way, it's my favorite Blade movie ever. Like
I'm gonna
I
look
had
it.
no idea Guillermo del Toro directed that movie for the longest time, and then when I was like, "Okay, now it makes sense," because 'cause I'm a massive fan of his. But in that movie, he's talking to Blade, and he's like, "You should understand where I'm coming from with this. You're an outsider, and these in a political sense, these pure-blooded vampires are trying to run the world, and, we need to bring it back down to,
No,
not
Mac.
having them." No, Mac, that's right.
No,
We
Mac.
need to
Yes.
we need to have it back to how it used to be, where it's like, the outsiders have the power, not like the, you know, very political in a sense right now. And then Deacon Frost is always trying to, you know, be like, hey, you're different, just like I'm different, just like you're different, just like me. So every single protagonist in the Blade movie has always been like, you should be on my side because I know where you're coming from. But like I said, Blade has that moral compass where he's like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to cross that line. I know what the right decision is.
Yeah, and it's just I don't know, there's just a presence with Blade, right? And it's that kind of thing that we were talking about with you get it with this and with Underworld and with Queen of the Damned, where you have this like almost hyper goth grunge reality layer to it, where you have, goth is cool and
Yeah.
people are all, this is just how it is. And it's not something that people find shocking or anything like that. It's just an accepted layer. And I think that's so cool to have that kind of just be like a non-factor in this. And then it builds in this movie, obviously. Um, with everything going on. So, but for those of you who have not watched Blade Trinity, it is currently streaming on Pluto TV. Um, Essentially, if you have watched the other two Blade movies, that like Westin was just saying, it does kind of build on the story from the both. This is kind of a weird trilogy though too, because let's be honest, it's cohesive in the message, but it's not cohesive. This is like each movie is kind of its own. There is no like really one thing that ties it together other than Blade constantly wrestling with his morality with society and how that kind of ends him on the chessboard of all of this.
Blade, well, this one I felt like was more of the campy of all the three, because like the first two, very goth, very just like I mean, literally in the first movie, everybody knows the blood rave scene.
Yes.
But and this one's more of like, I mean, you have Ryan Reynolds in it, and it kind of adopts a lot of the campiness of Ryan Reynolds to it. So I know a lot of people don't enjoy this one all that much. I'm in the camp. I like them all for what they are, but this one's definitely more campy than the other two.
Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't like the way that they played up his protagonist and the way that they kind of portrayed Dracula, well, Drake, as they call him in it. But it is a kind of interesting concept because let's face it, there it is a probably reality based thing that if there was a Dracula, that it would not be, it would go a lot deeper than just, okay, he popped up in Transylvania, he was this warrior, stuff like that. There could be the idea behind that that is just kind of what we associate with Dracula, and it could definitely be something deeper. Now, do I think they thought out the plot most of like his origin story? No, but I mean, like, it also was trying to tie it back into the Blade universe, and that could be kind of gnarly because we see that in the first movie where it's this like ancient blood ritual that's going to take away the powers and bring up upon a blood god that will be powerful enough to take Blade down and will take away all the pure bloods and everything. And you have that part of the culture. You see that too in the second one where it's kind of the purebred culture and how they kind of focus in on that. So I see where people might have some criticisms, but I mean, like, it's Dracula.
It's fun.
It's fun.
But I love the fact that so my favorite scene in the movie, it's a different world, right? Like Dracula coming into this and say, into this, he was asleep for thousands of years and comes back and see how the world is now, right? My favorite scene in that movie, I don't know if you want to go by like timeline or if you just want to.
No, I was about to say basically before Westin goes by what he was going to say is Blade Trinity. Like we do this with any Horrorcraft, I want you to watch the movie. I'm not going to explain it, go through it frame by frame because that's not who I am. I want to talk about the meat and potatoes of this, but essentially the purebreds are tired of getting their asses kicked by Blade, and they decide that, okay, who would be the one to come and kill Blade and get us back on top? And doing that, they released Drake, aka Dracula, who has been asleep for thousands of years, and decide that it is time to take Blade down. And they do that through kind of a multi-layered plan. And we, at the end, get a face-off between Blade and Drake. That is probably one of the coolest, like, katana sword fight situation with Blade. Because he's also supposed to be like this warrior god who like decimated societies. So that's pretty much what the movie is about.
Yeah, but one of my favorite parts of the film is when Drake's walking around and seeing how the world has changed, and he sees like how Dracula is all made up into being like this joke, and he walks into this goth place and he just sees these people like, oh, so you guys are into vampires, and they just are making fun of this guy because he's an old guy walking into the store, and there's a couple of goth pricks and they're just being like, you know, whatever, and he just takes them down, eats them, and like throws one of the guys through the window. I just liked it because it was like, that's kind of what Dracula was in this movie. He likes Blade in a sense that like, hey, warrior spirit, you know what it's like, but he dislikes that Blade is here representing and defending a society that he feels is less than. There's another scene where Drake's when they first meet, when he's on top of the skyscraper or whatever.
Yeah, he's on
got
top
the
of
baby in his hands and gives that exposition of like, they're just insects down there, don't know what real battle is like and things like that. So
yeah, no. So out of pocket question, but I just want to know, because this is like, out of everything that was in that, because when Drake walks in, it is a whole store that is focused on Dracula items. What was your favorite thing that they brought up in that? Because I know mine, and it's a little twisted, but
like the items in the
yeah,
store?
like they had the different Dracula items. They were talking about the different, like,
probably the Dracula bobbleheads. I thought they were kind of cool. I didn't get a chance to really look at. I was more kind of watching them talking to each other.
I think this is funny just because of the fact that they bring it up, and just because of the fact that he picks it up. And to me, that is a very meta scene. But the fact that they have a Dracula vibrator and it has the Dracula head on it, and he picked it up at one point in time, it was like what is this? It just, to me as a Dracula fan, just kind of made me giggle a little bit. I'm going to be honest, because like, being thousands of years old, and like, first of all, you don't know obviously what a vibrator is, because this is a little bit of a spicy conversation. Okay, so viewer beware of this section. But just to me, it's funny because of the fact that, like, obviously he wouldn't know what that is, picking that up, and then it's got his face on it, and just the fact that you've like been so ingratiated in this culture that you have no idea what's going on. To me, it was just kind of like a funny moment that would be like the one thing that he's like, what the fuck is in there? Because that shop quite literally has everything Dracula.
I didn't even notice that's what it was.
Yeah,
that's how out of it I was. So I'm gonna have to.
You could tell that I watch this movie a lot. There are some movies that I have that I put on the background. This is one of them, because think about it, for its time, there are a lot of big people in it. Like you have Wesley Snipes, like Chris Christopherson is R.I.P. Like literally. That was probably one of the saddest deaths ever, I think, in my life, because I just associate him with being, the character that he is in this movie, Whistler.
Yeah.
And I feel like he was a family member that I grew up with. Like, he was just this kind of like he was like a crotchety kind of like uncle character, but he had this heart of gold underneath. And I always loved him in the movies. So, but he's in it. Ryan Reynolds is in it. Jessica Alba's in it. Natasha Lyonne is in it. Like a young Natasha Lyonne. Like, there's a ton of Dominic Purcell, who was doing Prison Break at that point in time.
Yeah.
He was Dracula. So you
Triple
have a
H.
lot. Triple H is in here. Parker Posey. Like there's
Yeah.
a lot of people. Yeah, I forget about Triple H.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that the cast is pretty solid. I mean, there's just a lot of people, very, very memorable people. And this was, I want to say this was right after Ryan Reynolds did, oh God, what was it? Amityville Horror.
Amityville Horror. Yeah,
So
yeah.
naturally you get like Ryan Reynolds with his shirt off for a couple scenes in that movie.
I mean, Ryan Reynolds was always that guy. Let's be honest. Like he kind of always like he has always been that character, right? We just
Yeah.
see him more now because he is Deadpool. But like, I mean, Ryan Reynolds, I just want to talk to you for a minute. You need to come back to horror. Like we need you. We need you back. Like, please just come back.
Have you seen Buried?
Buried with him, yes.
Yeah.
Where yes.
Highly recommend if nobody has seen that movie. It's great.
Yes.
I mean, Ryan Reynolds in horror is great. I mean, even in Amityville Horror, because he's so serious in that movie, and there's legit the scenes that he does with the kid in that movie is legit like, sorry, is it fucked up?
No, it's terrifying. And
yeah,
to me, Amityville is one of those. I remember watching Amityville at my friend's house, and her dad came up behind us with the pig scene and literally was like made a noise behind us, and we were all like, ah! And I remember that original one. So when that came out, that's crazy to me because like, how do you escape a house? And him as that character, that's a hard character to play. Like there are very few people that I could say him, and I think Terry O'Quinn, who does Stepfather and Stepfather Part 2.
Yeah.
That is a very hard role to play about somebody. I mean, Ryan Reynolds more so, like he was kind of a good guy in the beginning, and then he gets his whole entire soul possessed and turns into this just deranged, like, man.
Yeah.
Terry O'Quinn, he was deranged from the beginning. I mean, he knocked out his whole family and then goes to start a new one. But just inhabiting that kind of character, that could be hard. Like, and to do it with such like finesse, I think is great.
Those are my favorite type of people that I like to watch. That's why sometimes, at least in TikToks and stuff, those are my favorite type of characters to portray because they're so fucking fun to do. Somebody that's as deranged like that, like somebody who's comes off as this sweet, innocent person, and then just like they're really just have up underneath it all is like this horrific monster, whether it's literal monsters, vampires, or like serial killers and stuff. So
yeah, I just I agree, and I think there's an art to being that kind of character too, because now we've come back full circle and we're embracing the morally gray characters where before in society we really weren't. I mean, we kind of see that with Nightbreed. When Nightbreed first came out and they first did the test footage of that, an executive made a decision after seeing 20 minutes of it and chopped that movie into half because he didn't think that the monsters being the good guys would market well. And that became a long process for Clive Barker to get it back to the original version that he wanted it to. I mean, we've seen that kind of come back. The director's cut, I think, came out 2014, 2015. I remember that distinctly. But there are a lot of movies that we see try to kind of put that narrative in, but kind of fall flat. Like Fright Night. I've had this discussion. We've had this discussion on this podcast and talking about Horrorcraft. I don't think Jerry is necessarily the bad guy in that movie. Like he is, but he's only a bad guy by circumstance because this kid kind of comes up and blows up his whole entire life. We see that now with Interview with the Vampire. With Lestat and Louis' relationship. Like, I think having those kind of characters are good because not everyone's good. There are parts of there are parts of my personality that aren't necessarily the greatest. I'm not sunshine and rainbows all the time, but I don't think people expect me to be. But morally gray characters, like sometimes you have to be a villain to protect the
Mhm.
people you love. And whether or not that translates well, that's kind of just where things are at. And I think we see that more so with vampires because in a lot of situations, like with Louis and Lestat, with Blade, with different, like they didn't have a choice. And
Mhm.
if you never had a choice at being a monster, how are you going to handle those situations in life? So
Just because you're dealt a bad hand doesn't
yeah.
make you a monster. Like with
Yeah.
Blade, Blade's born a half vampire, right? So he's automatically kind of seen as like, hey, I have to wrestle with this demon. Like we all have our demons that we're wrestling with, right? But Blade decides just because I have this thirst in me to want to rip someone's throat out doesn't make me a bad guy.
Yeah, no, and he goes to great lengths to try to
Mhm.
prevent that. And, we kind of see a lot of that in this third movie because they do kind of set him up and society to like take him down. We see that with him getting arrested
Yeah.
and all of that. And it's like I'm trying to help you guys and you are the ones that are making me out to be the villains. And we see that as he interacts with like the doctor that's like the familiar in the police station and all of that. But it's kind of that like thing of I'm trying to do right here and you
Mhm.
guys are punishing me for that because I'm a different person.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's a strong message. So then, we see him kind of get picked up by this ragtag group of people that are led by Jessica Alba and Ryan Reynolds' character. And we see how those dynamics kind of play out because he has to live in a world without Whistler now.
Yeah.
And that would kind of be a hard juxtaposition when you've had him his whole entire life. That has been kind of your adoptive father. And
Mhm.
now you kind of have to navigate the world. And now you have to be with these newbies. Um, Jessica Alba's character in this is badass though. I wanted to have that bow and arrow. Like
Oh, the Jessica Biel character.
Jessica Biel, yes, thank you for
Seventh Heaven.
Seventh Heaven. Yes.
Sorry.
That feels like a world away, doesn't it? Like
It's funny
seven.
when I was watching this, and it just because that was the first time I saw her. I don't know if she was probably in stuff other than that, but
Yeah.
I remember when that show was out, and like for whatever reason, it kept popping up on my TikTok feed, and I was like, oh yeah, she was in that.
Yeah, I forget that. Like that's so
Yeah.
crazy now to think about because
Hmm.
like doesn't that seem like ages ago? Like that was when the CW was like fresh. We were
Yeah.
fresh off the boat. Like this was like even I would say like beginning of pre-Charmed era. Even
Hmm.
like I think Seventh Heaven started before Charmed. People can fact check me on that if they want,
Yeah.
but my recollection is I think that was even before Charmed,
Hmm.
which is crazy because I think the CW is now no longer.
It's
I
not
think
around anymore.
yeah, I don't think the CW is or there's plans of like taking it off the air. So, like I don't think it's been as strong since Supernatural and all the other
Hmm.
shows that were kind of tethering it for a while left.
Yeah.
Um, but that seems like the end of an era because I remember it strongly. I mean, Seventh Heaven maybe, but Charmed was
Yeah.
mine most definitely. I grew up heavy in that universe. So, but no, I wanted to be her with the bow and arrow. And the
Hmm.
fact that she did like the scene around a lot of the visuals in this movie are just like top tier.
There's a scene, and there's a scene that I always feel okay. The scene where they have all the bodies wrapped up in bags up against the wall, and they're like, no, they're all brain dead, but we're keeping them alive to like basically take all their blood and stuff. I thought that was a missed opportunity. I kind of wish that Drake would have came by and saw that, and either we would have gotten his reaction of it, whether he would have been pissed off or if he would have been like, oh, this is great. But it also kind of ties back to the political stance of it, like where like the vampires have all this power in society to where they could get away with, they're controlling top, they're controlling regular people,
Yeah.
humans in high positions to be able to get away with, having fresh blood all the time. And it was such a visually cool scene because the way they had everybody strung up right there.
Yeah, no, I definitely draw to that because you know what that brings up in my mind because this movie came out afterwards, but Daybreakers with
Mm,
Ethan Hawke and oh my gosh, there's so many people that are in that movie that are just for not Sam Neill.
mhm.
And it's where like vampires have taken over the world and we're, losing the last bit of humanity. The last of the humans are dying and they're trying to come up with a replacement. But you see like that where they are harvesting the bodies and this becomes an
Yeah.
issue and things like that. But it made me definitely like now rewatching it made me think of that because
Mhm.
that is kind of like the same thing is okay if they had spoiler alert if they had succeeded in Drake taking Blade out,
Mm.
would that have become the case? Like would they have drained humanity to the point where you know this would become an issue? I think that's like please go watch them together because I think that would be a really weird juxtaposition, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but no, I think so too. Like, because we see that in this movie, right? Drake's disgust, even with his own kind. Like he is very clear about the fact that he's like, I'm gonna do this, but I don't fuck with all of you. Like,
Yeah.
I don't like this. I don't like where this has become. I don't like how you guys have done this. Like, this is not anything that I would do.
Yeah.
And
But
he
there's
thinks,
a enemy that I feel like could I
yeah,
mean, another warrior I can try and fight, you know?
yeah, and do we feel like he kinda just went along just so he could have the opportunity to fight Blade? Because I feel
Oh, yeah.
like that's a good yeah, I would follow along with that too, okay? If I
Mhm.
run out of challenges and then I met somebody that was like Blade, I think I'd be like, "Yeah, let's do this. Let's do this. Like, let's light this candle because 'cause it's
Yeah.
been, like, thousands of years since I've had a challenge." And I think his character in this movie expresses that so well. We see it in other movies, but maybe not as drawn out as it because it's his whole part of his personality where he is just disillusioned with the idea of living forever. He's just like, listen, I was a god. I took out the people I needed to. I went to sleep. I no longer needed to be part of this narrative. I do not like living forever. I do not want to be a part of this system. I do not want to do these things, but you are dragging me in it. And we
Mhm.
see that with other characters too. Like it's the idea of be careful what you wish for because you think living forever sounds great, but then living with the idea of living with forever is a whole other complete concept.
Have you seen, the show Sandman?
Yes.
That episode where Death and him were like, "You know what? I'll take that bet. I want you to have that McMahon live forever." And the guy, like, first whatever hundred he has to meet Death and Sandman are they brother, sister, kinda?
Yeah, yeah, they are brother
Yeah,
and sister.
yeah, and then they basically kinda get into this talk where it's like, "I want you to let one human live forever, he wouldn't be able to handle it." And so every 100 year they basically give this guy a more like death can't take him, but every 100 years he has to meet at this bar so they can just have a talk so he can find out, hey, what's been going on in your life. And like every 100 years he goes through like a roller coaster, like what first 100 years was great. Second 100 years, he's like, I'm tired of this. Third 100 years, like I have nothing left. And then just over and over, it's just you go through all that stuff. I love that show because it gives us all those questions and answers them in very fun and interesting ways.
Yeah, yes, I agree with that because I love the Sandman as well. I'm excited to
Mm,
see the second season. I've already watched some previews for it, so
yeah.
I'm super excited to see that in 2025 and how that is going to be put across. But it does pose those questions because then we see an episode later where the Sandman's technical wife gets kidnapped and is a
Mm,
muse for this writer, and it's like the writer, he thinks, oh, I'm the good guy, but yet he's keeping this person captive in order to fuel his greed and his life and stuff. So it does kind of pose a lot of those questions that you think, okay, I think this would be a good idea, but would it really in
Yeah.
reality? And this is what we kind of see with Blade too, because think about it. If Drake had succeeded in taking Blade out, they would run out. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
that was Deacon's whole thing in the first one. Like, we should be gods. We should be at the top of the pyramid. Humans are nothing. And they're trying to tell him, like, we've lived for thousands of years. This is not going to be sustainable if you just bleed everyone dry. Like, but they don't care. And we see that with Danica and her brother, where they kind of have that same like top tier arrogance that you got from Deacon, and it kind of melding into like a new version. And it's like, okay, if they had succeeded, how long would it have taken them to run out of humanity? Like,
Mhm.
it sounds good in theory, but when your food chain is a short, limited supply and you're taking everyone out, how do you deal with that issue?
Right.
So I think that that's a good like juxtaposition. If you could pick one side character in this movie, whether it's Ryan Reynolds, it's Jessica Biel's character, it's Parker Posey's Danica, or Triple H's, or Natasha Lyonne is like the brilliant scientist that's going to come up with a cure. Who would you pick?
Mhm. Like which one's my favorite?
Yeah,
I mean, Ryan Reynolds is just so damn entertaining. Just like all of his one line, like I don't know if he ad-libbed a lot of stuff or
yeah,
if they actually wrote that for him. Like every movie I see of him, I'm always like, before he got famous, I'm
yeah.
always like, did he just kind of like ad-libbed all these things, or was it just his delivery on things just were so it's just the way he just talks and shit is so entertaining. I really love, I always forget her name, the one that was coming up with the cure that has the daughter.
Yeah, Natasha Lyonne.
Yeah,
Yeah, she. Yeah,
love her.
yeah.
She's such an underrated actress. I love her in
So
everything.
so under like I'm glad that now we're starting to see her like in a renaissance with like all the things that she did
Mhm.
in the movie, um and all the opportunities she's had now. I think it's just incredible. She actually has a movie. If you've never seen it, it is fantastic. And I'm just telling you this as a friend and
Mhm.
everyone else who's listening, because you guys are all my friends too. Um, there is a great movie that she did, and I'm going to look it up to make sure that I say it right. But it is done by Peaches Christ, who has been on our podcast before,
Uh-huh.
who is a very, very, very talented, very uh she they just kill it. They're also in the horror sphere though. They
Mm.
did a movie and it was called I want to say Last Matinee, but like I'm thinking about that as that there is a movie called The Last Matinee, and I get both of them confused sometimes because obviously I watch a lot of movies, and they all kind of merge into each other, especially when we're talking about movie theaters, because it shouldn't, but it is a great concept. Um,
Mm.
but All About Evil, that's what it is. It's called
Okay.
All About Evil. They had a really cool edition come out, but it's basically a horror, like this woman who is like a film student, and she decides well, no, not a film student, but she screens snuff films as she starts realizing that people gravitate toward them, so she starts making the stuff films and killing people off. Elvira's in it, there's a bunch of other people. It is
Hmm.
very, if you love campy and you love like gore and guts and literally like just all of the goodness, All About Evil is a good one. It's on AMC Plus.
Ooh.
But like she just like she realizes that the gore is connecting with people. She wants to save the theater, and she just starts doing her own snuff films, and it is just a wild ride from there. But she is incredibly underrated. You know, she did Russian Doll. She's done
Mm,
so many others. She's got the one on Peacock that I'm thinking about. But I love her too.
yeah.
Um, I kind of like Triple H's character.
Yeah.
I feel really weird about saying that because, like, obviously, like, we're we're kind of in the same age range, you and I,
Uh-huh.
where WWE was like pretty prolific growing up, you know, and you had all those big storylines and like him and McMahon's daughter and everything
Yeah.
like that. Um, but his character in this is just it's kind of fucking wild. And now that I watch it back, like he's just hilarious.
Yeah,
Like,
he's a big, buff, goofy dude that, like, it's funny when him and Ryan are on this scene together, and I feel like at least with like in there with the other people, he's okay. He's kind of in the background, but when him and Ryan are like on the same like screen together, it's hilarious.
oh, they ate it up, and I love the
Yeah.
fact that, like, a lot of times he's the one that's, like, holding the Pomeranian and
Uh-huh.
just back there being, like, I just think it's hilarious. Like, you have Triple H as a vampire
Mhm.
holding a fucking Pomeranian. You can't tell me that that wasn't an intentional choice and that doesn't work because it
Yeah.
does. Like, you make it very clearly that this is, like, her lackey and that he's willing to do whatever there is to do. I like Ryan Reynolds' character too. I would have to say though, if we're talking about one specific person, I like Danica. I think she
Mhm.
is crazy. I think, listen, strong, powerful woman character. I jive with that just like I jive with Natasha Lyonne's character. But Danica is just hilarious. Like the part where she's sitting on the table and they're talking about everything and somebody like says something to her and she like hits that person with a heel just because
Yeah.
like and she's just ordering people around and stuff like she's kind of a megalomaniac and I'm here for it.
Mhm.
um I don't want her to succeed. I'm
Yeah.
rooting for Blade, but her as a character is hilarious and I feel like she's like strong and confident like yeah I'm gonna get Drake under my heel and we're gonna get him to do this and then everything's gonna be great and then she actually goes toe to toe with him and she's like I cannot do this.
Yeah.
I cannot do this. Like he is a strong powerful person and I don't know if they show it on this version or I have a special edition where they show all the deleted scenes. There is a deleted scene with her and him where they like get it on and like he actually like drinks from her and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I
And
remember that.
yeah, so but I'm just like same girl. Like I say that I have this like big powerful energy, but then if somebody were to like try to match me on that, I don't know, I might have folded like a chair too. So I think it's just funny that like she just tries so hard to exude this energy and then it kind of becomes her undoing because she can't control him. Like she
Mhm.
thinks she can, but she really can't. And it's just kind of interesting. Just and then her whole like relationship with Ryan Reynolds' character and that was kind of like her plaything for a while and talking about getting him like back under her thumb and stuff like that. I just think that that's a very interesting, and I like Parker Posey as like an actress. I think she does a lot of like funny things out there, but her in this just kind of I don't know. It just to me was like a funny character.
She doesn't play it overly serious, which is funny
Yeah,
because she's like the head chick in charge, you know what I mean? But she doesn't play it. There's a lot of scenes in there that are just kind of thrown in to make you it's a fun movie. This movie is
yeah.
definitely a campier, just the first two movies were very serious, very goth, very dark, and this one, it still has a couple of those elements, but it's got a lot more fun, campy stuff thrown in.
I feel like it's a product of its time because this is
Oh,
like
yeah.
late early 2000s, early 2010s kind of, that kind of era where you see this because you could say the same thing about House of Wax. House of Wax
Mhm.
is kind of campy. Like they knew what they were doing when they put Paris Hilton in there and all these characters. But then when you look back on it, you're like, damn, that was a really good horror film, though. Like, that really was because, like, they knew that these people, like, they were bringing these people in for a reason, but still they like amp up the gore, the story, and you get to that, but like I think it kind of got lost in the fray because they hired these really attractive stars that were popular in the, early late 2000s, and you kind of get lost into that. But we have a lot of these movies, I think, from this time period that are now looking back on it, they're bangers, but they were trying to call back to like campier 80s horror mixed in with some modern. And I think because there were so many of them, all of them just kind of got lost into the fray. Because you get like Prom Night, you get House of Wax, Ghost
Texas
Ship,
Chainsaw.
Texas Chainsaw, 13 Ghost, like all of these movies that just kind of in this time period that were like mixing with different elements. And now looking back on it, we're kind of like, man, they did kind of hit at that point in time. Like,
You don't know when you're in the good times until it's gone.
until it's gone.
A lot of those movies, a lot of people look back and like, oh, those aren't classics or anything like that. But were they a good time? Fuck yeah, they were. I mean, those were some of the best movie going experiences, going to see those type of films. Like Dead Silence was one of my favorite movie going experiences. I remember going into that movie. White Noise was another one. Wasn't really a great film, but the movie going experience was great. Just all those remakes from the early 2000s to mid 2000s, they weren't specific. They had their own story and they just modernized everything without trying to outdo the original.
Yeah. So this might be a hot take with you on here because you're a gamer and you have probably played these games. To me, it's kind of like what happened with Resident Evil. I understand why people get upset with the franchise because of the fact that it didn't really kind of hold up to the source material. And I get how frustrating that is because it is kind of like when you have such a great book or movie and you can't adapt it as well. It's like, man, you have a blueprint. Like, you can do this. But they were kind of a good time for back then. They were kind of, I think they were trying to be close to the source material. I don't think it happened, but they're a good time. And a lot of them were like in 3D as we started getting older. I remember watching, I think it's Resident Evil 6, the one where she's like down in the bunker and stuff like that. I watched that in theaters pregnant in 3D. And I could tell you that that was a fun time. That was a great time. Do I think that they're true to the Resident Evil franchise and what Resident Evil is laying down? No. Do I ever think that we're really going to get that? I don't know. I would hope so because they're great, but not everyone can do it.
They came out with a Resident Evil movie recently.
Yeah, Welcome to Raccoon City.
Yeah, that was pretty close to the source material.
Yeah, I liked it.
And I liked it. Yeah, it was good. And it's kind of going back to the time period for what it was. The gothic kind of darker action movies. And the first Resident Evil I actually really liked.
The first Resident Evil movie is a banger. Like, I think we could say that now because you have Mila Jovovich, you have Michelle Rodriguez, you have so many stars that ended up blowing up after that just were like crazy. And the second one, was it as solid as the first one? No, but you're in Raccoon City. You got like Odette Ferrer, you got oh my gosh. I'm trying to think of the comic at the time that was in that. But you have so many people that are in that. And I understand that then it kind of kept going and it petered off a little bit. But like, they tried. And at some point they were just like, fuck it, we're just going to have fun. And that's fine. But I think for the time period, they were good. Like, we're talking about it's the same way. I will literally fight every single person that tries to say that the Resident Evil movie, not the Resident Evil, the Silent Hill movie is not good. The great. Silent Hill movie for when it came out is fantastic. Now, am I upset that the second movie came out and literally was just like, no, I'm really excited to see that the original person from the first movie is now doing the new movie. And that it looks similar to that. It looks buffed up, and I'm super excited. But for that time period, like when Pyramid Head pulls that girl's skin off, crazy. Oh my God, I had to stop the movie. I literally was so like 17-year-old me was gagged. I was like, how is that
The
even possible?
the ending of that movie with the girl with all the not razor blades, oh my god, help me. The barbed wire
Oh
just
yeah.
coming on and just killing everyone.
Mhm.
That scene, even to this day, because I used to show movies in my Discord server for my community members, and there's a couple people that had never seen Silent Hill for the first time, and it's one of my guilty pleasure movies. And that scene, a couple of them was like I had to step away because it was just a gnarly ass scene. And that
Yeah.
early 2000s, mid 2000s horror films, just they were just built different.
And
It
you
was in a whole scene.
Yeah, and you brought up a good one. Dead Silence to me, I remember the first time I watched that. And again, I swear we have to be related at some point because you're saying the same things that but that whole scene of like uh the uh the dolls all moving at
Mhm.
once where they're in the theater. Like a lot of those movies had atmosphere. Like we're talking about Dead Silence, Darkness Falls is a great one. Dead Alive, the gaming
Yeah.
one with,
Mhm.
Frankie Muniz and everything and the whole Countess Bathory plotline. Like a lot of those, yes. Did they have elements that probably weren't the greatest? It was the early 2000s. CGI was kind of all over the place. The visuals weren't like what they are now, but they were good. And I think
Yeah.
that this is one of those movies that kind of got lost in that plot line because, like you said, it is a campier version of Blade. Um, but I think it's one we need because look at what just happened. Blade was in Deadpool versus Wolverine, and his
Mhm.
character was fucking hilarious in that movie.
Wesley Snipes is, and we forget how good of an actor Wesley Snipes. I
Mhm.
forgot if something, I don't know, I forgot if something happened with him. I don't know his history or anything like that, but
I
he was so great
Yeah.
in that movie, Demolition Man.
Yes.
And he's an actual like martial artist too. So like when he's doing all those stunts, you can see it and it's very, very real.
I don't know if you are in the same boat as me, but I liked the Expendable movies just because I grew up with a lot of like those action stars. Like though my grandfather is kind of well, pretty much like my dad. And
Mhm.
we would watch a lot of those movies, my great grandfather as well. And so having those movies where it kind of tied all those back in, where all those like big, like Chuck Norris, Sylvester Stallone, Jason
Mhm.
Statham was in it, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mel Gibson, like all of those together. It was kind of like Christmas for a lot of us because we grew up watching those movies with the people in our life, and now they're coming back and they're doing all this movie together. But him, Wesley Snipes being a part of it, I'm like, man, he could come back and do the Blade movies. Like
Yeah.
he's still got it. He's
Yeah.
still here.
He
And
looked older, but he did great. Sorry.
yeah, he looked like an older Blade in Deadpool versus Wolverine, but I think it would be cool to see a movie with an older Blade, like a Blade that has become disillusioned because of everything that and is teetering on that line. I
Mhm.
I would love to see that. I would love to see that Blade that kind of comes back. And listen, Deadpool did say, "Can you bring back some of my friends?" He didn't specify which friends,
Mhm.
didn't say which ones at all, but we know some of them came back. So and they just shelved the one that Marshid Ali was supposed to do.
Yeah, I was bummed
So
about that because I mean,
I
I actually, if someone else was gonna play Blade, I can totally see he fits the build, and there's a lot more Blade content out now since Blade was kind of
uh,
almost revived, at least in the comic book
mhm.
sense. There's a lot more stories out there that I guess from what I've heard from some friends of mine that are into comic books more than I am, there's some really good stuff out there that they can pull from. And Logan was another they can use,
Yeah.
older Wolverine. I
Yeah.
mean, that worked. There's so many routes they could go. If they
Yeah,
wanted to go
I
back.
I just feel like it would be a really a cool thing to see him come back and and play upon one of those ideas because I think people are, and Marvel, you kind of owe it to him. Like, let's just be so for real right now. Blade is the reason why Marvel was able to stay in the the late 90s, early 2000s. Blade is what kept the lights on for a long time, because Blade was very popular. And so because of Blade, you now have the movies that you do that Disney kind of taped over and did with Iron Man and different things like that. So let him come back for a little bit. If we can let, that kind of multiverse kind of reality, we could bring Blade back for a little bit. Like, we could have one where, he's in it and then Rashid Ali takes over from there. And it's like a whole multiverse thing. If Deadpool and Wolverine could do it, and I was kind of critical about that, I'll be honest, as someone who loves those characters. Because, like, X-Men to me, X-Men and Blade were like Marvel to me. They were some of my favorite characters. Elektra. Listen, you could say whatever you want about the Elektra movie, but Elektra was like my Marvel Jesus, along with Blade. But Elektra was just like, and I was so excited to see them together because let's face it, like Elektra and Blade are kind of in the same realm together, with different, I guess, obviously different ideas. But Elektra was, Jennifer Garner is always beautiful, but I think also too, like the idea that plays with Elektra and how she comes back and the martial arts side and stuff, and you get that with Blade as well. I would love to see them bring both of them back, but do I think that's going to happen? Probably not, and it makes my heart sad, but it's okay.
Hashtag bring back Blade.
Yeah, hashtag. And whenever I say hashtag, I think there is a running joke between Kylie, Mary, and I where we're like hashtag blessed. Because, there will be a lot of people on the internet that will be like, the worst thing happened, but hashtag blessed. And I'm just like, I don't think we needed to put the hashtag with that, friend. So, yeah, we do need to bring back Blade. If there was one vampire movie that you could recommend to somebody listening to this, and we've kind of thrown out a lot of them, but if there's one that you just feel like to your core is essential viewing for somebody who is in their vampire journey, which one would it be?
Near Dark.
Oh,
for sure. If you like Western style modern vampire films, that movie's going to give you everything that you need of what vampires really are. You know what I mean? Because it's dark, it's gothic. Bill Paxton covered in blood in a leather jacket. That's honestly one cosplay that I've been dying to do for years, but I'm like, I don't believe I could do it justice.
You listen, I will co-sign on this. You do it, please, for all of us. Just do it, friend. We need it. We need it in our lives. There are so many people that have forgotten the power of bloody vampire Bill Paxton. We need you to take up the cross to bear and do it, please.
Dude, Near Dark is great. Lost Boys is, if you want something more campy, gotta go with that. If you want something more family friendly, Fright Fest oh my god,
Fright Night.
Fright Night. Thank you. I actually have that on Laserdisc, funny enough. But yeah, so many. If I can recommend one, Near Dark for sure.
Yeah, Near Dark is a hard one to find though, because it did get like remastered and put on Shudder for a while, and then it's like popped up at different places at different times. But it is hard. I know, because I have a big physical media collection, and Near Dark, like one of those DVDs right now, goes for like $100.
Yep. Physical media, it's like you got to have it, because otherwise you don't know when something's going to jump ship to another place. People, I forgot, I was dating somebody who's like, why do you have so much physical media? Like, and I'm like, because if it leaves, I can just go on the shelf, snag it from there.
Oh, friend, when we're done with this, I'll show you. But yeah, if anyone is ever curious, in the background there is literally like 6 or 7 different shelves of different things that I have collected over a period of time. Like because of the fact that there are some, like a good one about this too is Dawn of the Dead, the original. That
Mhm.
came out on, I think it was 4K, like in the UK. And I think you can get it and it will still work over here. But that one too, I have that on DVD. And I know when I was at like my local, we have a place called The Exchange that's like your local shop where you could go in and they have used movies, you can sell your movies and different things like that. And I'm real cool with the guys there because we're always like just shit talking about horror and stuff like that. Like we just kind of vibe. I noticed that they got a copy of Dawn of the Dead and they were selling it for like $80 because it's like going pretty high. Because like not a lot of people, I know that there are different rights things and different things like happen. So as much as I love streaming, I also think it's important to have physical media as well. I think we could have both exist and it'll be okay. But just because things do get pulled, like we'll come to do an episode here for the podcast. And again, I run 3. So between the, Midnight Bite here, Horrorcraft, and Spooky Moms, there are times where we plan stuff out in advance, and by the time we get there, it is gone.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's okay. But like when I'm working with different people on different coasts, that is kind of hard, too. So I know, like, most recently, I think it was around this time last year, around Valentine's Day, we were gonna do the original My Bloody Valentine. When we went to go film it, it was off streaming. The day before we dropped the episode for the 2006 version, they brought the original back on streaming because it was, like, right before Valentine's Day. And I'm like, "You couldn't have just done that a little earlier, bruh?" Like,
Yeah.
to help us out a little bit, but you kind of have to catch them sometimes, especially when you have older ones like Vincent Price ones. When those go on sale all the time, like on, digital and stuff like that, I will buy those up because at
Yeah.
some point we're going to talk about all of them. Um, so you might as well.
I'm a massive Vincent Price fan. I've seen all of his films. So
Oh,
all of them.
I
Haunted
mean,
Palace is my personal favorite.
House of Wax. We did an episode about that, and I
Yeah.
forgot how big of a fan I am of both of them. Which is crazy because seeing a wax figure in real life would probably make me like just shit my pants if I'm being completely honest. I just like no, I'm not that kind of person to have it like right in my face. Like I am a wimp when it comes to haunted houses. Um, because I just can't like I'm now getting to the point where I can start trying to do it, but, because I know more of the behind the scenes stuff, but yeah, I can't do with, like, real life in person, so seeing, like, a wax figure or something, and especially seeing House of Wax, both of them, I don't wanna look at it and be like, "Is there a person inside there?" Like, blink twice if you need help,
Yeah.
which then would scare me also, if that actually did happen, but I can't deal with that kinda. But Vincent Price, I mean, and, he helped out a lot with vampires as well, and, if it wasn't for him, a lot of people like him, you had Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, Lugosi, Karloff, a lot of them that kinda held the vampire genre down until we got to, like, the late '70s, early '80s, and then it kinda took off from there, and it's kind of because of films like Lost Boys and Monster Squad and Fright Night and all of these movies that just kinda came out of nowhere. And then you got the gothic part of it, obviously, because of Francis Ford Coppola's version and Gary Oldman. So and then we got the vampires like Blade in the early 2000s. We had him, The Forsaken. If you've never seen that movie, that is a great movie as well. Kind of campy, early 2000s. We had a lot of those kind of grittier vampires. And then Twilight hit, and we got like the morally gray, seductive, like your friendly, neighborly vampire, Mr. Rogers type style vampires. And now we're getting back into no, they will fucking kill you. Um, and I
Yeah.
think that that's great because we need, as much as we kind of needed some of the sparkly vampires, we also need the vampires that are going to take our throat out. So I think those are great suggestions. If you can't find Near Dark, I would definitely encourage, if you ever have the chance to purchase it. It is a great one. It's Catherine Bigelow, and it's Romeo and Juliet. Like, it is a
Yeah.
Romeo and Juliet story, but vampires. If you cannot, I would highly encourage you to watch the new Salem Slot, because that's available everywhere. And that is a great kind of starter movies to vampires, because not all vampires are sparkly and seductive. They do want to kill you. And this is case in point. And if you're looking for the Blade movies, I know the third one is currently on Pluto. The first one pops up from time to time. I would just consistently keep checking. Blade is a very popular franchise still and continues to keep popping up on streaming here and there. So, but go ahead.
I don't know why it's not on Disney Plus. Because don't they own, or is it Sony that still owns it? I don't know. Because I thought
I don't know.
I don't know why it's not on there. But I always
I
say also another movie that probably will never leave streaming, 30 Days of Night.
Oh,
It's on Hulu.
yes.
It's on a lot of things. So
Yeah, if you like, I would just highly encourage, like, if you like any type of like vampire, 30 Days a Night is a very solid. That is one of the first rated R ones that I saw in theaters by myself. And I was with a group of female friends, and I had to be the strong one because everybody like got taken out at different parts of that movie. Like, I know the first big one was like with the dogs, but then when people started dying, like, I had a whole group of friends that were like trying to bury their faces into my shoulder because they were like freaked out about they were like, we thought this was going to be vampires. And I'm like, it is vampires. It's just really fucked up vampire movie that doesn't have like seductive vampires.
and the ending is very beautiful too. In its own.
That
It hits
ending.
hard. Well, I'm not gonna spoil it for anyone here, but it's a ending that hits hard.
I would say that kind of also is the same way with Near Dark, because that ending is kind of powerful too. Because here's the thing about Near Dark, and I'm not going to spoil it for anybody. 30 Days a Night is also on Pluto, but I'm not going to spoil this for anybody. But the ending of Near Dark, there's a lot of characters that were from the Alien movies, because obviously James Cameron, who made the second Aliens, his wife at the time was Catherine Bigelow. So that's why you have a lot of the same actors from Aliens in Near Dark. But like that scene with Lance Hendrickson and the woman that plays his wife at the end, and in my mind, Lance Hendrickson was my dad growing up. For some reason, like growing up, I just thought, like, man, this guy is wholesome. He seems like everything I would ever want growing up. And I just thought, you know what? One day, I'll get to meet him. Still hasn't happened. I'm holding out hope for that. But him and Elvira in my mind were like, that's what became me. Like his role in horror and Elvira's role in horror. But yeah, Near Dark is just beautiful. And listen, Bill Paxton as a cowboy with blood and that bar scene, that should have won like an Oscar right then and there. Like, just in my mind. So another good one though is Abigail. If you're looking for something newer that's kind of diversifying, Abigail is terrifying. And plays with some of the same ideas as some of the other vampire movies. I also highly encourage, people talk about this all the time, and some people don't like this movie. I get it. But to me, I like The Invitation. It's kind of like what if Dracula was on Wattpad. And if you like are kind of like, okay, well, what if somebody like wanted to be with Dracula, kind of did, and then it all went sideways? That's kind of that character. So I would highly encourage it, but we'll put all the recommendations down below. If you are not following JustHauntr, please do. He is all across the social media interwebs, and we will put all of his stuff down below. He does really cool stuff on Twitch. I've been on a lot of his lives. If you're looking to kind of find out what's great in horror gaming at the moment, I would highly encourage. And listen, if you're looking for someone to be your undead friend, like that friendly vampire neighbor next door, he's got a bunch of those on his TikTok. And he's kind of like the Mr. Rogers of vampires,
Man, I'm gonna start telling people that and see how they react.
Oh,
I feel
listen,
like they'd be like, "What?"
listen, you have full stop. Like I called Vincent Price the Mr. Rogers of the horror community, but I feel like you're the vampire Mr. Rogers. Like if Mr. Rogers, you wanted, you came to Mr. Rogers' door for a cup of sugar, you might offer them a cup of blood, but you'd be generally nice about it. You just kill the people that would be kind of shitty. And I'm here for that.
Telling people that. Can't be telling people that. I have a reputation apparently to uphold too.
I mean,
you've seen my lives in the comment section.
I have. So, but if you missed his Westin's appearance on Horrorcraft, I will link that down below. And as always, you'll probably see him over and over again because we just have so much fun talking about different movies. I would highly encourage, if you do like Blade Trinity, to watch all the Blade movies, see how they kind of stack up, and kind of take your journey from there. But until next time, it's me, Cassandra, and this was the Midnight Bite, your corner of horror where we talk about vampires. And we'll see you next time. Unpleasant dreams. Bye.